And thank you both very much for joining us. Brando, tell us about the report that you're bringing to Parliament today. It's yet another step in this all-important AI Act implementation.
Well, we are now looking at how AI can influence trade relations. In fact, this report is very specific about how the AI, including the AI Act measures, but also in general application of AI, can influence how we deal with trade, both for protecting the goods that we trade with other parts of the world, and how we can be sure about rules of origin, how we can protect from counterfeiting, from criminal acts to create problems with our trade, but also how we can use AI as an instrument that is promoting trade, in fact, to facilitate commerce and to build more common ways of doing things between peoples.
This is a very positive impact of AI, isn't it? Presumably there isn't any disagreement on that.
Yeah, it's a largely supported report. There is a support in the committee. It was very large, and I suppose it will get a large support in the plenary, but it's also a topic where we see some strong issues in terms of the need for EU to act, which is the need to look at what we need for AI to function, which is supply chains of semiconductors and energy. So we look also at that angle of how trade enables or disables the possibility to use AI.
Okay. Now, Michael, you, along with Brando, are co-chair of the European Parliament's AI monitoring group. On AI and the AI Act in general, there has been an awful lot of disagreement. Is that increasing, or do you see a convergence at all?
It seems to me, Brando was obviously in the last mandate, I wasn't, but it seems to me to be a constant. I mean, obviously you have the democratic forces looking to regulate what is this very exciting technology, but also one that poses challenges. And I suppose those who are regulated are very powerful entities. More than 50% of the venture capital in the United States is now going into AI. So these are huge corporations, among the biggest in the world. Obviously they're resisting regulation to the greatest extent that they can, so they have a big lobbying exercise of member states, of parliamentarians, but of the Commission as well.
President, colleagues, the Benifei report is very clear about what's at stake. The EU's strategic dependencies in semiconductors, in cloud infrastructure and critical minerals are not just abstract risks, they hinder our ability to be relevant in the AI economy, and we need to address them or fall behind. We need to be relevant in this age as we have been in previous ages, but we also need to be relevant, I believe, in international governance of AI, in particular the existential risk that it could pose. I wish to draw this House's attention to something that happened last week, and that was in a maybe overly heralded trip. One of the concrete results was that President Trump and President Xi have agreed to hold formal dialogues on AI safety, on guardrails for the most powerful AI systems. And very recently we saw where these systems are heading with the Anthropic Mythos model, which exposed critical vulnerabilities in our cybersecurity infrastructure, or at least we believe it does. We haven't really seen it, very much of it at this side of the Atlantic, and that too begs questions that need to be answered. But the question, and the big question, is where is Europe in this governance conversation? Just as we can't allow ourselves to fall behind in terms of dependencies, we cannot also be irrelevant to the international discussion on this. We need to reach out to similarly minded allies like Canada, South Korea, Japan and the United Kingdom to work together to develop international standards, not just standards determined by two poles of a bipolar world.
Brando, you, of course, it is the world's first legislation to regulate AI, and you've been driving the implementation of this for several years now. You're seeing pushback, though. Against what specifically?
Well, we have seen in time a constant of seeing governments being a bit pushy against rules to limit their possibility to use AI, especially for surveillance and for impacting on freedoms of the citizens. So we have seen...
Sorry to interrupt, but are these countries within the EU or
within
outside?
the EU,
Okay.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
They do not want limits on the use of AI, and so the European Parliament is in fact in this context the real voice of the citizen, because we are the ones who look at the interest of this individual. The government's approach is very collective. They are not looking at the individual rights that we are looking at very carefully when we design policies to avoid misuse of AI for surveillance, for compressing democratic freedoms. This is the debate we are seeing in US today, and we have been preventing this already in Europe with measures like this. But on the private sector side, we have seen instead pressure regarding rules for transparency on AI, to avoid having certain actions to be done by the big developers that are fundamental. For example, making AI content recognizable to contrast the abuse of deepfakes and misinformation, but also protection of human creativity, protection of copyright, to avoid that creators are dispossessed of what they create to train AI without having any remuneration.
You see it more and more in European Union election observation missions across the world, the very heavy use of AI. Most recently in Bangladesh, it was on a mission there, and there was a huge amount of AI. It's to the extent that I suppose, you know, there's a huge amount of apparent support for something online, and you don't really know that that's bots or real people. So you don't, you can voice any opinion and have it buttressed by an AI sort of expressing support for it. Yeah.
When you mention real people there, that of course is what this is about, and it isn't hypothetical. You're hearing about real cases of children, of young people in particular, you know, being threatened and being humiliated by, say, nudification apps, for example.
Well, I mean, we had a high-profile example even in the general election in Ireland with a former journalist who was treated in that manner.
Yeah.
It's almost a price that women in particular now pay for running for election, and it's unacceptable. It also, I suppose, has the risk of sort of normalising even when it's synthetic material, normalising sexualisation of children, which is obviously something that's very dangerous for society.
Yeah. And I mean, there is general agreement on that, but on the implementation of the Act and the regulations, you've said, Brando, that the biggest threat to the AI Act is political. What did you mean by that?
Well, there is pressure from various actors to reduce the implementation, the enforcement. So in fact, if you can't change the law by saying we do not want any rules, etc., which is not very popular today in the EU, there is a conscience and understanding of the risks. So you can try to push also from outside, maybe from the US, for example, to say just apply it very mildly, very lightly, do not really apply it. This is a tentative that we see, which we should reject very firmly.
Because this is playing to the corporations rather than to the
and the average citizen, consumer, worker, small business.
Yeah.
And I mean, we do know that many of these corporations have their European headquarters in Dublin, and many of them, it's a matter of public record that they have been approaching the Irish government to ask the Irish government to intercede on their behalf at a European level and try to water down implementations.
The point, though, is these corporations and these big tech companies, if they want to operate within the EU and if they want that market to sell their products, are they not going to have to abide by the rules?
Yeah, they will have to, but the point is you need to enforce them, because they can also interpret the rules the way they want to do the least possible. So you need authorities that are able to say, sorry, but to comply, you need to do this and this and this to protect citizens from risks. But if you do not have authorities that say that and apply the rules, then they can just say, I'm complying without doing anything.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, thank you both very much for joining us. We're going to hear a lot more about this soon.
Thank you.